Quantitative easing, brave or balmy?
Is quantitative easing, or let's call it printing money, shall we, brave or balmy? Douglas Alexander.
I think it's sensible, given where we find ourselves. We need to get more money into the economy in order to boost demand, to keep people in work and to create jobs. The Bank of England, which is independent, has reached a decision that it's the right thing to do because it's brought interest rates down progressively over recent months.
Why did it have to ask the Chancellor if it could do it, if it's independent?
Because there's a legal framework whereby the Bank of England has to work towards a 2% inflation target. It is
But in doing this, it had to get the Chancellor's permission, so it's not independent.
No, if you just let me finish, it's moved to a point where it's cut interest rates down to 0.5% today in order for it to meet its objective, which is to keep inflation at about 2%. It's had to use a different instrument. That instrument is what's called quantitative easing in the terminology. It's something the United States has been doing for some time, and I think it's one of the instruments that we have to use to try and keep the economy going.
Sorry, but why did it have to get permission to do it? Why couldn't Mervyn King just do it? Why did he have to go to the Chancellor? I thought the whole thing about Labour and Gordon Brown was we let the Bank of England run the economy in these respects for us.
No, the Bank of England runs monetary policy, but this is a decision which impacts on the whole of the economy while trying to meet the inflation target.
Brave or balmy, Andrew Mitchell?
Well, I think it's right to do it, and we will support the government's decision today, the decision of the Bank of England, confirmed by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But it does show what a desperate position we are in. And the truth is that no one is sure whether this will work. We're going to inject a huge amount of money into our economy. Most of us have been brought up almost from birth in the knowledge that printing money, debasing the currency, is a terrible thing to do and causes rampant inflation. And the truth is that we will see how we get on. If it's stopped too soon, we will then quite possibly put ourselves into a double dip depression or recession. And if we go on too long, we will stoke up rampant inflation with all the difficulties and dangers which come from that. The Japanese tried it. It didn't work for the Japanese. The Americans, as Douglas said, are already trying it. But this is a real shot in the dark. No one knows whether this will work, and it shows what a desperate position we are in.
Of course, you're the Tory. You're the Tory who said at the start of all this that the recession was good for the Tories. Do you still hold that view?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure, David, you read the whole of what I said. What I said
read enough to know that you said that.
No, I didn't say that.
You didn't say it at all?
No, I did not say that. What I said was that the conference in Birmingham last October was a very good opportunity for the Conservative Party to explain what we would do to try and mitigate the terrible effects of the recession.
An incredibly good moment for the Tories.
You may be a victim of the Labour Party's spin line machine, but I never said a recession is a good thing. And how could any sensible person say something like that?
Not good, but good for the Tory party. Germaine Greer.
Well, I'm just a stupid old woman and I don't understand anything about it.
Well, then I go on to somebody else.
No, don't understand anything about it, I am actually telling the truth, whereas all these people who are in charge of monetary policy don't understand anything about it either. Maybe somebody in the audience can explain to me how it encourages banks to lend money if they can't charge any interest. They only get 0.5%. Then what are they going to lend at those rates? How does that work? And we're putting money into the economy. Excuse me, there was already money in the economy. Where is it? Who's got it? Presumably, all those people who made those fantastic gains during the madness have got that money. They've got, the hedge funds that made 32% gain in 1 year. Why can't we get that money off them? Do we not know how to get it back?
Toby Young, is this how you see...
I don't think I can explain it to you, Professor Greer. My problem with this is that the Bank of England has cut the interest rate by another 0.5 percentage point in order to reduce the inflationary pressure this will put on the economy. And, I have a fixed-rate mortgage. So every time the government reduces the interest rate by a percentage point or half a percentage point, it's like a sword in my side. And I remember 12 months ago, when I was trying to decide between a tracker mortgage and a fixed-rate mortgage, I consulted all my friends in the city, took a straw poll, and without exception, they all advised me to go for the fixed rate because interest rates weren't going to fall under any circumstances. No wonder the banking industry is in trouble.
Is printing money brave or balmy?
Well, it does seem a bit balmy. I thought the reason we were in this difficulty is because, as consumers, we were all much too profligate when it came to borrowing. So what's the government doing to get us out of it? Not only is it borrowing huge amounts of money, but it's now printing money as well.
Okay. The man up there on the left. You, sir. In the checked shirt. Yes.
Who's going to decide how much money to print?
Shirley Williams.
Are you calling on me?
No, I'm calling on you.
OK, let me say two things. First of all, Toby Young's advice came from people who, like Germaine Greer said, didn't know what they were talking about. That's why he got himself hooked into the wrong kind of mortgage. But let me have a go at explaining, as another old woman, to Germaine, what this is all about. Think for a moment. The banking system is constipated. The system, which is known as, God knows why it's called quantitative easing, but it's the kind of thing you could imagine...
Sounds rather suitable for constipation.
Well, I'm going to say a very advanced pharmaceutical company might use that phrase to describe... describe a laxative. This is a kind of laxative. The reason I say that is it's not as stupid as it may sound. You have to do it very carefully. On that, Andrew Mitchell's right. If you do it too much, you end up with a Zimbabwe currency that nobody wants to touch. If you don't do enough, then it doesn't get the thing going. So you have to make a very difficult judgment. And the reason that at the moment we haven't got anything going is because the banks are still not lending. They just are not lending. Go out and try to get a mortgage now, and you'll find it very hard indeed to do. So we have to get the banks to lend again. But the only way we can do that is by now printing money, because as rightly was said by Toby Young, at half of 1%, nobody wants to be bothered to pay for savings. So you're back in a situation where you have to bring off, or try to bring off, a very difficult exercise. Now, I agree with what everybody said about it being very difficult, but I want to add one other thing. I think sooner or later, and I've always believed this, we may have to move towards a different structure of banking, where we don't put so much money into certain kinds of investment. We distinguish between what used to be called retail banks and what used to be called investment banks, and we push them all together to the point where most people don't even begin to understand what's going on and certainly have no accountability for what's going on, and that's a very troubling situation.
You, sir.
I know we're in a pioneering situation which no one knows anything about, but who will be accountable for this if it goes wrong, and will we not reward him when it goes wrong?
Right. Who would your candidates be? The Prime Minister or the Bank of England or Douglas Alexander? Who would if it goes wrong, who's your candidate for not being rewarded?
Well, the government sets the inflation target. That's a legally set target for the Bank of England. And the central bank governor, the governor of the Bank of England, today decided that he needed this weapon in the battle to keep inflation within check and to avoid deflation. I mean, Andrew cited the example of Japan and said they tried this in Japan, it didn't work. Actually, it took them 8 years in Japan to recapitalise the banks. What we're doing here is actually what's happened in the United States, where there was action taken first on the banks, which aren't lending, and now we've moved to actually increase the amount of money circulating within the economy.
Do you have any idea how long it'll take yourself? Do you have any idea whether it'll work?
Well, we're talking about huge sums of money, but, but ultimately it is right to recognise that we will have to wait and see the impact that this has, both on the market. But there's no doubt, as Shirley says, the banks are not fulfilling their responsibilities at the moment. In some ways, this is cutting out the middleman. It's making sure that the Bank of England can loan directly to the companies on whom all of us rely, not just for jobs and investments, but also for profits.
Man in the green shirt, there you
yeah. OK. I agree with Germaine Greer. Since this financial crisis started, I think a lot of people are talking as if they know what they're talking about, but I'm under the impression that they don't. I make reference to Sir Fred Goodwin. I read today in the paper, local paper, CityLink, boss is taking £6 million bonuses. I don't think, never mind trying to restart the economy. What about the people that are robbing the economy and undermining what you're trying to achieve? No one seems to be taking responsibility for that.
Okay. And you, sir?
In response to a point made by Jermaine Greer, I worked in the city for 9 months. Nobody knew what they were doing. And we're now faced with a situation where the government has helped us get into this mess by a 10-year love affair with big money and by turning a budget surplus into a deficit. And nobody knows whether they're going to get us out of it. And banking can't return in the way that it did.
How long did you work in the city for?